Hi, my name's Venora. 3 days in the kitchen, 19 place settings, hand-rolled napkins tied with twine, I braided myself. And then, one message. Change of plans, restaurant, adults only. No explanation, no apology. Just like that, I was cut out. From dinner, from decisions, from the will. But what would you do if your own family erased you with a group text? Because I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just pressed send. And a week later, they called 98 times. Would you have answered? The light in the kitchen was soft, just the way I liked it in the late afternoon. I'd cracked the window above the sink to let in a whisper of spring air, mixing with the scent of cinnamon and roasted garlic. The playlist I'd made just for the occasion, Sam Cooke, Aretha, and a little Carole King, played faintly from my phone speaker while I smoothed out the last pie crust. I wasn't rushing anymore. The hard part was done. I'd been cooking for 3 straight days, chopping, braising, kneading, seasoning. My hands were raw in places from peeling potatoes and scrubbing pans, but I didn't mind. It was my mother's 70th birthday, and I'd volunteered to host the dinner at my house this year. 18 people, possibly 19 if Aunt Thelma didn't bail last minute. I'd printed custom place cards with gold foil names, arranged fresh garden roses in the center of the table, and even cleaned the baseboards, which no one would notice but me. But still, it mattered. My father loved brisket. Delphine, my older sister, always asked for lemon asparagus. And Mom? She adored peach cobbler more than any dessert on earth. As I placed the cobbler into the oven, I felt a rare sense of hope fluttering under my ribs. Maybe this year, maybe they'd see it. The effort, the care. Maybe someone would say something like, "We couldn't have done this without you." Even a small thanks would have been enough. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me out of that brief fantasy. I wiped my hands on the apron and picked it up from the counter. It was a group text from Delphine. Change of plans, restaurant, adults only. No greeting, no context, just a single clipped sentence. No one else replied, not even Mom. I stared at the screen, the message hanging there like a slap in the middle of my kitchen. Flour clung to the sides of my fingers as I held the phone. They weren't just changing the plan, they were cutting me out. The cobbler timer beeped behind me. I didn't move. I just kept staring, the words replaying in my head over and over. Adults only. I wasn't even worth a second sentence. I glanced back at the dining table I'd spent the morning setting. Every plate aligned, every napkin ironed and folded into a soft triangle. Candles stood unlit. There was no need now. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, and I typed, "Should I still finish setting the table?" 3 dots. Someone read it. Then nothing. I deleted the message. I didn't cry. Not right away. I went back to the stove and stirred the mashed potatoes I'd already finished hours ago. The scent of butter and garlic was still warm, but now it was all for nothing. "This isn't the first time they've erased me," I said aloud, my voice low. "Just the first time they didn't pretend to hide it." Years of memories flicked across my mind. Me setting up chairs at birthday parties, staying late to clean after family dinners, always behind the scenes, but never once included in the photos. I thought this year might be different. I really believed that. I turned off the oven and gently set the peach cobbler on the counter. Its golden crust was perfect. Mom would have loved it. Would have. I walked to the sink, wiped my hands slowly with a towel, and looked around the empty kitchen. The house was so quiet now, like it was holding its breath with me. "They didn't forget me," I whispered. "They removed me." I turned toward the hallway, untied the apron from my waist, and folded it neatly over the back of a chair. Okay then. I stood there for a long time after whispering those words. The oven had cooled. The candles I'd planned to light were still tucked in the drawer next to the matches I wouldn't need. I moved without really feeling my limbs, like muscle memory had taken over. I folded the apron, straightened a napkin corner on the table, checked the timer that no longer mattered. And then I sat down. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't know what else to do. The phone was still in my hand. I opened the group chat again, the message staring back at me like a dare. Change of plans. Restaurant. Adults only. No follow-up, no sorry, not even one of those thumbs-up emojis they usually toss around like candy. I tapped the screen and typed, "Should I keep everything warm?" Or, and then I watched. One by one, the dots popped up. Delphine, Mom, Gavin, all red, all blue, all blank after that. I didn't even feel hurt in the usual way, just this strange fog, like I was being smothered under something invisible. I locked the phone and let it drop to the table. It's not that they didn't care. It's that I trained them not to have to. For years, I showed up, filled the gaps, made sure no one felt awkward or empty-handed. I covered when Delphine forgot to bring side dishes, when Gavin was late picking up Mom. I was the just let her handle it person. And I had handled it. Right up to the moment they decided I wasn't necessary anymore. Memories trickled in. Birthday parties where I stayed back in the kitchen. Christmas mornings when I took all the group photos but was never in them. Even the PTA banquet, where I arranged the decorations and still ate standing by the punch table while they sat at the head with nameplates. People call you the glue, like it's a compliment. I used to believe it was. But glue doesn't get framed. It gets scraped off when it shows. I had just stood up to start putting the food away when my phone buzzed again. A neighbor, Leona from 2 houses down, had sent me a link to a Facebook Live. Her message read, "Thought this was weird since you weren't with them?" I clicked it. There they were, my family. The table at Barrow's Seafood was long, the room softly lit with twinkle lights and helium balloons hovering near the ceiling. There was laughter, wine glasses raised, my uncle clapping Gavin on the back. A banner behind them read, "Happy 70th, Mom!" Delphine stood to make a toast. She held a glass, no doubt with the cheap Prosecco she always insisted was just as good as the expensive stuff. And what caught my eye was what was in her other hand. A folded place card. The design looked eerily familiar, gold calligraphy with pressed fern leaves. I'd made those. I'd hand-cut them, glued the details. So she'd taken my work, just not me. I sat back down, now shaking. I covered the mashed potatoes with foil. The cobbler too, though the crust had started to go soft. I poured myself a glass of water and spooned a small portion of food onto a plate. I ate in silence. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of being left out of something I helped build. This was supposed to be the one time I didn't end up serving myself, I murmured. I didn't let myself cry. Not yet. I knew if I started, I might not stop. After finishing the meal, barely tasting it, I washed the dishes. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't sit in that kitchen and look at what was supposed to be anymore. I grabbed my phone and opened the group chat one last time. My thumb hovered. Then, with a steady breath, I hit Leave Group. Let them figure it out next time. Let someone else remember the napkins or the damn sweet potatoes. I stared at the screen for a beat before whispering the thought that had haunted me since the text came in. Maybe it's not about being forgotten. Maybe it's about being erased. I didn't sleep. Not really. I dozed off for a bit just before sunrise, but the kind of sleep that doesn't rest anything. When I got out of bed, the kitchen still smelled faintly like warm sugar and rosemary. Not comforting, just stale. A ghost of what could have been. I moved like I was on autopilot, rinsing a plate that hadn't been used, folding the napkins that never touched anyone's lap. Some messes don't belong in the sink. They're on people's hands. I opened my laptop on the counter, not because I needed to work, but because I didn't know what else to do. I clicked into my email out of habit, and there it was. Subject line, Update, Family Legacy Fund Beneficiary Structure. Sender, Arliss Rudd, Esco. I didn't even open it right away. I stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked long enough. Then I clicked. The language was cold, efficient, legal. Effective immediately, your name will no longer be included in the primary beneficiary allocation list as approved by the voting committee. No greeting, No explanation, no courtesy call, just one digital gut punch. I stood there, reading it again and again, expecting something to shift in me, but all I felt was the air in the room becoming heavy, like everything was pressing down on me at once. I hovered over the reply button. My fingers clenched slightly, but I didn't write back. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask for reconsideration. I just closed the tab. Because if I said anything, it would be me trying to negotiate my own worth again, and I was done doing that. They'd drawn a line in the sand. Quietly, legally, permanently, and they didn't even bother to tell me in person. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down the oldest binder on the top row. Initial Framework, Q1 Phase Launch. I flipped through the tabs. Budgeting models, operating procedures, email templates, all mine. Hours of unpaid work, countless calls after my day job. I remember running mock board meetings in my garage, using paint stirrers as name placards. I thought family meant something different. I thought contribution was its own form of membership. But apparently, legacy only counts when it fits the version they're willing to frame. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. I played it. Mom's voice came through with that forced gentleness she used when she wanted to deflect instead of confront. Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. I know you probably saw the fund update. We'll talk soon, okay? Delphine says you're a little emotional right now, and maybe it's best to let things breathe. Just take a walk, get some air. Love you. I let it play twice, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to make sure I wasn't imagining the tone. The way she didn't ask how I felt, just told me what to do. The way she didn't say it was wrong, only that I was overreacting. Delphine says you're emotional. Of course she does. They always package dismissal in concern. She's tired. She's overwhelmed. She's sensitive. That's how they neuter truth, by calling it a mood. I put the phone down. Then I opened a blank email window. 2. BoardOLegacyFundTrust.com. No subject line yet. No draft. Just that one line blinking back at me, like it was daring me to write something that would finally draw my own damn line. I didn't send the email. Not yet. I stared at the blinking cursor, like it owed me something. The screen glared back with that harsh, flat light. Cold, clinical. Just like the message Arliss had sent hours ago. No call, no warning. Just a sterile notification that I'd been written out. The afternoon dragged. I stepped away from my laptop, not because I was finished, but because I couldn't stare at that white space anymore without feeling like I was drowning in it. I grabbed my phone, not looking for anything in particular. Maybe a headline to distract me, maybe a recipe I wouldn't cook. What I found instead was a voice memo, forwarded from my cousin Carla. No context, just a 3-minute clip. I pressed play, and the audio crackled to life. It was my Aunt Sheila's voice. That girl? She's sweet, but she's just kitchen help, really. Laughter followed. Soft, comfortable, familiar. Delphine's voice chimed in after a pause. She always volunteers. That's what makes it easier. They said it like I wasn't family, like I was the woman who came in to refill glasses and disappear before dessert. They didn't know they were being recorded. And no one, not one person, paused, corrected, or defended me. I sat down at the kitchen table slowly. My hands were shaking, not from rage, but recognition. This wasn't new. My name had been left off emails more times than I could count. I'd been forgotten from the gala program 3 years ago, even though I'd designed the damn thing. When people exclude you consistently, it's no longer oversight. It's intent. I read that somewhere once. It stuck because I didn't want to believe it could be true in my own family. But here it was. Intent. Proof of it, in their voices. I opened my browser again. Out of habit, I clicked the Legacy Fund website. It had been redesigned recently. Delphine made a big deal about it. More modern, more professional. That was her phrase. Scrolling through the Our History section, a banner image caught my eye. Gala night, 8 years ago. I remembered that night vividly. I wore a blue dress with a neckline that made Mom frown, and I stood on the far end of the lineup for the board photo. But in the image on the website, I wasn't there. The picture had been cropped. I closed the site and opened my phone's gallery, swiped until I found the photo from that night. There I was, on the end, half turned toward the photographer, mid-laugh. You couldn't miss me. But on the official version, the one that mattered, I had been snipped clean. It hit like a quiet internal bruise. One that didn't show but ached just the same. They didn't just forget me, I said aloud. They curated around me. The fund had been built on my unpaid hours. I made the structure, the systems, the documents they still used were based on frameworks I developed sitting at this same kitchen table, coffee gone cold at midnight. But none of that was in the brochures. No one gave a speech about invisible scaffolding. I closed the photo app and opened my notes folder, dragged every legacy-related document into a new directory, and began tagging them. Year, task, owner. No anger, no rush, just precision. I wasn't organizing out of spite. This wasn't for revenge, it was for construction. If they wouldn't give me a seat at the table, I'd build another one, with room for everyone who'd ever been erased like I had. I whispered it, not to anyone in particular, just to the space around me. If you're not in the picture, were you ever really there? I opened a clean spreadsheet, labeled it Structure, Original, and typed the first line of data. This time, it would be recorded. Not for credit. For truth. The file name stopped me. Legacy Fund, Originals, sent from a burner Gmail account I didn't recognize. No body text, no subject line beyond the title. Just a ping from my phone that cracked the silence of the kitchen. I clicked. And I froze. Inside were PDFs I hadn't seen in years. Some I didn't even know had been saved. Early spreadsheets, draft proposals, my old budget templates with handwritten notations in the margins, my handwriting, emails with timestamps, attachments I'd long assumed had disappeared into the family's convenient black hole of revisionist history. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. But my shoulders dropped, just slightly. This wasn't vindication. Not yet. But it was weight, real, tangible weight I could now put on the other side of the scale. Later that evening, I cleared the dining table. Not for guests, not for family, for truth. I set out a manila folder labeled Legacy Archive and began to pull from drawers, old file boxes, saved thumb drives, receipts, screenshots, a PayPal transfer for $12,000 dated 5 years ago, money I'd sent to Delphine when she'd called me crying about needing to pivot the fund's structure. She had said it was temporary, said she'd pay me back, said it was just family. Attached to the receipt was a photo of a handwritten card. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one who never asks me to explain. D. The same Delphine who just last week appeared in the fund's glossy newsletter, arms crossed, standing in front of the foundation's new office expansion with a caption that read, Delphine Krantz, our founder, took a leap of faith by funding the early seed round from her own savings, a testament to bold leadership. I stared at the card, then at the receipt, then back at the caption. I didn't need the spotlight. I never had. But I needed the truth not to be erased and repackaged into someone else's resume. I thought about how I got that money in the first place, selling my car, my Honda Accord. It wasn't glamorous, but it ran, and I sold it for less than it was worth to a neighbor who knew I was in a hurry. For her. I remembered the phone call. I promise I'll make it right, V. You're saving me, just until this thing turns around. It did turn around, and she walked away, holding the credit, while I stood in the shadows, carrying the cost. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, Fund Timeline Reality. I started logging the hours, every file I built, every call I joined, every weekend I missed. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it like I was sweeping a floor before building something new. I remembered a quote my mentor once told me. You don't need to burn bridges. Just refuse to rebuild them with your own wood. I wasn't going to light anything on fire. Not yet. But I wasn't picking up a hammer for their house anymore either. The manila folder was full now. I left it open. I wasn't done, but I didn't feel rushed. I was playing a longer game now. I picked up my phone and hovered over Arliss's name. I didn't call. I didn't need to. They already knew what they'd done. You don't show them you know, I murmured. You let them show you what they think you've forgotten. Just then, a new notification buzzed on my phone. Google Drive, new folder shared. From unknown, title, Legacy Fund, Originals. I opened it again, this time slower, and there it was, something I hadn't seen since the beginning. A scanned cover page, initial operating agreement, contributors, Venora Ellis, Delphine Krantz, Gavin Boone. My name, first. The words were still there. I remember everything. I didn't save the draft, didn't even add a subject line, but those 3 words on the screen had already stirred something in me I couldn't unfeel. So instead of hitting send, I closed the laptop, made myself a cup of tea I wouldn't finish, and walked away from the desk. I needed air, but not outside. I needed to breathe where the silence had lived longest, inside that folder, the anonymous one. I opened it again from my phone while standing in the doorway of the living room, the floor still scattered with old notes and unopened holiday cards. The folder hadn't vanished. If anything, it seemed more real than ever. The first file I tapped was named Venora a process flow.xlxx, and there it was. My format, my naming convention, my tab colors, my sequence of steps labeled in my voice. I knew that spreadsheet like I knew the lines in my own palm. I didn't leak this, but someone out there knew what they'd taken from me and wanted me to know they remembered. I printed it. One by one, I began organizing every document in my own archive. I labeled each file by year, project, task, cross-referenced against emails, texts, scraps I'd written on sticky notes, and the backs of bank envelopes. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post. I didn't even vent to the dog across the street, who usually barked through the fence whenever I walked past. Instead, I started a personal ledger titled Legacy Truth Log. It began simple. 2016. Created budget model from scratch after Delphine's consultant quit. 2017. Donated personal funds to print first marketing materials. 2018. Drafted pitch deck for local sponsorship outreach. This isn't revenge, I told myself. It's record keeping. It's time the story stopped being one-sided. Every hour I hadn't been paid for, every detail they'd presented as visionary that I had quietly built with no credit. I logged it all. Just as I was about to log off for the night, a message popped up on LinkedIn. Jessa Hathaway, my college roommate, now CFO at a mid-sized firm in Atlanta. Hey, it started. I was browsing Legacy Fund's new site. Didn't I see your name on the founding committee years ago? It's not there now. I blinked, then typed, "Not anymore. They edited it out." Her reply came fast. "That's ridiculous. You still have the email from when they asked for help? That's enough to burn a house down." I paused, rereading her words twice. I did have that email, the one from Delphine begging me to help fix the budget, saying she was drowning and needed someone who could clean up the mess without making it worse. It wasn't about revenge, but it was starting to feel a lot like readiness. I created a new private folder. Proof. Not for now, but soon. Then I added Jessa to it. She didn't ask for access. I gave it anyway. I reread our short exchange, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not validation, not hope exactly, but a shift. I didn't even ask her. She saw it herself, which means others will too. I opened my laptop again, more slowly this time, created a blank document. Title, To the Board, Draft, Not Sent. The cursor blinked in silence. I didn't save it. I didn't have to, because I already knew the opening line. I remember everything. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened the email draft, attached the documents, no frills, no explanations, and clicked Send. I didn't sign it, didn't need to. I didn't name names either, just attached what was already theirs, meeting minutes, early drafts, Scanned memos with my initials still faintly visible, screenshots of proposal emails they thought were forgotten. A clean, concise timeline. The final line read, "Please review with integrity. You know who this is about." Then I closed the laptop and exhaled like I'd just stepped out of water. It didn't feel victorious. It felt still. My phone was quiet for about 20 minutes, and then the read receipts started pinging one after the other. Arliss first, then Rebecca from the finance board, then that always silent man from legal, David something, who hadn't said 5 words to me in 3 years. I didn't refresh obsessively, just sat there, sipping a now cold cup of coffee, and watching the board start to twitch. No replies, no questions. But that didn't mean they weren't reacting. I'd learned long ago that silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means the meeting is happening somewhere I'm not invited. By mid-afternoon, 2 of the PDFs had been forwarded twice, one from a private Gmail to a board-linked domain, another directly to external counsel. They were scrambling. I could feel it without hearing a word. Later that night, I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but because the power flickered in the storm rolling through Charleston, and maybe, deep down, part of me liked the metaphor. Then it happened. My phone buzzed again. Leona, my neighbor 2 houses down, sent me a link to a blog post. Concerns raised over transparency in local family fund. No names, no accusations. But every line screamed truth. Phrases lifted directly from my documents. References to early operational contributions from uncredited sources. They even quoted one of my original project outlines word for word. I didn't leak it, but someone had. And I knew exactly what that meant. Someone on the inside wasn't playing by their script anymore. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't screenshot it, didn't forward it, didn't comment or like or share, just read. And read again. It didn't feel like I thought it would. It didn't feel like payback. It felt like something I'd been dragging behind me for years had finally slipped off my shoulders. The kind of exhaustion that comes from holding a truth too long, finally releasing. Not relief, just air. Clean, full air. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in weeks, I let my shoulders fall, let my face soften, let myself breathe. At 2:03 in the morning, the screen lit up again. A message from the name I hadn't seen pop up in days. Delphine, just one word. Why? Now they're doing what they never did before, taking me seriously. That thought drifted through my mind as I sat up in bed, the sun just beginning to crawl through the cracks of the curtains. My phone was on the nightstand, buzzing before I even reached for it. When I finally unlocked the screen, I had to blink twice to register the number. 98 missed calls, 17 voicemails, Mom, Gavin, Arliss. And of course, Delphine. Her name scattered through the call log like confetti at a party I wasn't invited to. None of them said, "Are you okay?" in their messages. They said things like, "You've made this a mess. Call me back, now." What the hell were you thinking, Venora? I sipped coffee while playing one voicemail from Gavin on speaker. His voice was lower than usual, measured. I could tell he was reading from something. "This isn't about truth or fairness. It's about timing and image. You've jeopardized both." I set the phone down, not out of rage, but because I'd heard enough. Amazing how loud people get when silence finally breaks their script. By noon, I'd already walked the length of the block twice, just to stay ahead of the ringing. I needed to be moving, even if I didn't know toward what. That's when the FaceTime came through. Delphine. I stared at the screen a beat too long. Then I hit accept. Her face appeared, framed in sunlight and smudged mascara. She was dressed for optics, crisp white blouse, blazer barely wrinkled, earrings that looked intentionally understated. She didn't wait. "You embarrassed us." Her voice cracked. "I don't even know what you sent." She paused for dramatic effect, and when I didn't jump in, she blinked fast and kept going. "Mom's upset. You know how fragile she's been since the foundation's restructure. And Gavin's deal with that coastal project. He said the timing couldn't be worse." I let her go on. Every word sounded rehearsed. She was crying, yes, but not because she was sorry. It wasn't guilt. It was fallout. They cry about the fire, but not about the match they struck. She waited for me to say something. Anything. I kept my tone calm. I sent the truth. If it damaged something, maybe it wasn't that stable to begin with. There was a beat of silence. Then she ended the call without another word. I didn't save the video, but I screenshotted the call log. Something about it felt significant. Maybe not now, but someday. I sat on the front steps with a notebook I hadn't opened in months. I'd written something in it years ago during a retreat someone at the fund sent me to, the kind with overpriced speakers and catered boxed lunches. One quote was underlined twice. "You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I whispered it now, like a prayer. "I didn't blow up the house," I said. "I just stopped holding up the walls." And just like that, the guilt slipped off like an old coat. It didn't fit anymore. For dinner, I made something simple: rice, steamed greens, salmon baked in foil. I ate alone, not in sadness, but in silence that was mine. Not silence given to me by omission, but one I chose. At 9:47 p.m., just as I was rinsing the plate, my phone buzzed again. A text from Arliss. "Board is requesting a closed session, details forthcoming." No greeting, no context. No, "hope you're well." Just procedural. But I smiled. Now they're doing what they never did before, taking me seriously. The agenda email came just after 5 p.m., right as I was walking past the park where Dad used to play chess on Sundays. I opened it standing beside the iron fence, the late sun slicing through branches and warming my hands, even as the screen stared back coldly. "Final agenda attached for tomorrow's closed board session." I scrolled. My name wasn't under attendees. It was under subjects of concern. I exhaled. Good. That means they're finally spelling it out loud. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with my laptop open and my fingers resting lightly on the keys. Not typing, just waiting. I didn't need to send anything tonight. I'd already made my move. A message popped up in my inbox. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. That voice in the email, "It was yours, wasn't it? Thank you for finally saying it." I didn't write back. They used to look through me. Now they look for me. And that, right there, was the shift. This wasn't someone asking me to fix something or smooth something over or keep the peace for the family. It was gratitude. Nothing attached. No follow-up favor. No damage control. It didn't last long. Peace never does. But it was real. A few hours later, an email blast came through from the Legacy Fund. A shiny new digital brochure. A decade of impact. Polished graphics, pull quotes, stylized headshots. Curiosity got the best of me. I clicked. Founding contributors: Delphine Krantz, Gavin Boone, Rachel Sellers, Junior Associate. No mention of me. I stared for a while at Delphine's photo. Her arms crossed in that way she thinks signals power. Her smile just short of sincere. I remembered a draft version of that same brochure buried in my old inbox. I searched for it, found it under a label I hadn't touched in years. Fund. Original materials. There it was. Same layout, same headline. But in that version, my name was listed: Venora Ellis, Founding Operations Lead. Edited out. History is edited by those who need to look better in it. I whispered the words, then hit save on the PDF and renamed it Legacy Revision Proof.pdf. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I scribbled a note on a Post-it and stuck it to the corner of my screen. Let them publish. That'll make the correction official. The next morning, I took a walk. Nothing dramatic. Just 10 blocks down King Street, past the cafe I used to meet donors at, past the bookstore Delphine said was too local to partner with. I paused across the street from the Legacy Fund's office building. Through the glass windows, I could see them. Delphine pacing with her headset on, Gavin hunched over a laptop, Arliss standing near the coffee station, pretending not to watch either one. They looked busy. They looked concerned. They still didn't know where the storm was coming from, because it wasn't outside the building. It was under their foundation. I smiled. Then I walked back to my car, not hurrying, not hiding, just moving the way people do when they've stopped asking for permission. My phone buzzed. One last email before the day closed. Reminder, closed board session, 10 a.m. Deliberation on legacy impact. No instructions, just my name, in bold, not as a participant, as the reason they were meeting. You may want to prepare a statement. That line from Arliss sat at the top of my inbox, unopened for 2 hours before I finally clicked. There was no attachment, no additional note, just that single sentence like a match tossed casually near dry timber. I didn't panic, didn't pace. I made coffee slowly, like it was any other morning. The kind of slow that came with intention, not avoidance. By the time the sun peeked through the blinds, I'd already stacked the evidence, printed copies of emails, timeline breakdowns, a backup USB. The manila folders were labeled by year and sealed with blue painter's tape. I wasn't going to hand them over, but I needed to see them, touch them, remember what they stood for. They'd scheduled the board session for 10 a.m., tucked inside the Legacy Fund's downtown building. Glass walls, polished concrete floors, the usual performance of transparency. At 9:15, I received the official confirmation. You're not required to attend today's session. Not required, not invited, not welcome. I smiled. I didn't need to be in the room. I'd already furnished it with everything they couldn't ignore. I opened my email again and clicked forward on a packet titled Legacy Record. Full summary. No commentary, no subject line. I sent it directly to someone I knew wouldn't look the other way. Anita Laird, an external advisor who didn't owe the Krantz name anything. She and I hadn't spoken in over a year, but she once told me, "You were the only one who asked for process before results." I attached the files, hit send. Then I got in my car and parked outside the building, not to protest, not to be seen, just to be present. At 9:42, I saw Gavin walk in, adjusting his blazer and talking too fast into his Bluetooth headset. Arliss arrived next, hair tighter than usual, heels faster than they needed to be. Delphine came last, alone, clutching her tote like it carried more than documents. Maybe regret? I didn't move, just watched them pass through the glass. Sometimes, being absent is the loudest presence. At 10:23, my phone vibrated. A message from a number not saved in my contacts, but I knew who it was. One of the junior auditors I trained years ago. Someone who'd never had a seat at the table either. They asked about your early roles. The message read. I told them the truth. Hope that's okay. I stared at the screen before replying. It's not just okay, I typed. It's overdue. Another ping came through. A forwarded scan. My original project proposal, signed in ink, with my name printed across the top in bold font. Venora Ellis, lead strategy consultant. 8 years ago, buried ever since. I exhaled hard, then saved the file and backed it up 3 times. By noon, I was halfway through a walk along the Battery, cool breeze curling past my sleeves. I didn't rush, didn't refresh. I'd already moved past the need to chase the outcome. When you stop trying to get in their room, you remember you already built your own. At 6:02 p.m., just as I sat down to eat dinner, chili from the slow cooker still steaming, I saw the encrypted email from Arliss. Subject line, RE. Role clarification, internal use only. There was no attachment, just a single line of text. You may want to prepare a statement. They want clarity? They better bring a flashlight. I whispered it into the dark as I powered down my phone and set it face down on the windowsill. The glow of the screen lingered in my eyes for a moment longer than I wanted it to. But the quiet? That stayed with me. In the morning, I made tea. No calls, no texts. The kind of silence I had once begged for. Now, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like prep. The first voicemail arrived at 10:12 a.m., Grandma Mildred. Sweetheart, she began, breath shallow, voice coated in concern that felt borrowed. I don't agree with how they've handled things, but maybe let it be. Please. You've made your point. Click. No, I'm proud of you. No, I believe you. Just a polite plea to return to quiet compliance. I replayed it. Once. Twice. Not to hear her words, but to catch what she didn't say. She knew I was erased. She just didn't want to risk her seat at their table. She never did. And yet, I loved her for it. Quietly. The kind of love that recognizes frailty and forgives it, even when it burns. Later that day, I got tagged in a Facebook post from an old colleague I hadn't spoken to since we worked on the 2016 gala together. I clicked through. The headline stopped me cold. She was cut from the picture, but she built the frame. It was published on a local blog known for community spotlights and exposés. The article was unsigned, but I didn't need a byline to know who'd written it. It quoted phrases pulled directly from my draft email. Legacy doesn't begin with who's listed first. Silence is a transaction we're taught to make quietly. No one from the family had commented. Not publicly, but the absence of denial was its own kind of confession. And the silence? It was louder than rage. I walked through the hallway in my house, the one lined with frames. Photos from birthdays, baptisms, holidays where I had done the cooking, the organizing, the cleaning. In most of them, I was either blurred in the background or holding the camera. They never wanted me gone, just invisible, quiet, useful, like a serving tray that got passed around without acknowledgement, but was always expected to be clean and steady. A message popped up from Lisa, an old coworker. That article? That was you, right? Then another from Aaron, who used to intern under me before getting poached by Gavin. About time someone told the truth. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. Just typed back. Truth doesn't need a name when it's obvious. I let them draw their own lines. Mine had already been inked. And then, just as I was about to set my phone down for good, another notification arrived. A group message from Mom. We are having a family-only dinner Sunday night. No drama, just clarity. Clarity, as if it was something they could bake and serve over mashed potatoes. I read it 3 times. Didn't respond. Just turned off the phone again and stared out the window. They want clarity? I said, almost amused. They better bring a flashlight. I think we should build something together. May's message was still glowing on my screen when I pulled into Delphine's driveway that Sunday evening. Her porch lights were on. Her lawn looked clipped by laser. Inside, I could already see movement, shadows shifting behind gauzy curtains. I parked across the street, engine idling longer than it needed to. By the time I stepped through the front door, they were all already seated. Of course they were. The table looked like a spread straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Linen napkins folded into swans, crystal glasses, flowers too symmetrical to be real. For a second, I almost admired it. It looked perfect, I thought, like everything in this family always did. Until you asked who paid for the silver. Mom greeted me with a kiss that barely brushed my cheek. Gavin nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. Delphine waved me toward the only empty seat left, conveniently at the far end. Dinner began like a well-rehearsed play. Vacation plans, vague fundraiser talk, a couple jokes about Gavin's golf swing. It wasn't until the plates were being cleared and dessert hovered nearby that Delphine stood up with a glass in her hand. I'd like to clear the air a little, she said, as if that were a generous offer. She didn't mention names. Not mine, not hers. Just a polished monologue of implication. We've all made mistakes, she started. But some people, well, some things should have stayed within the family. We've had to manage a lot lately, I cut in. Some people, or me? I asked, my voice level. Because I came here hoping for a conversation. What I walked into was a performance. She blinked, lips parting just slightly. Mom tensed across the table. Gavin glanced at his watch, like it might give him an excuse to leave. Delphine smiled, tight, rehearsed. There's no need to get dramatic, Venora. I put my fork down. Dramatic? No, I said. Documented? Yes. Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed against the wood of the table. I didn't plan to check it, but something in me did anyway. A new email. Subject line. I read your story. Thank you. From May Simmons. She and I hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since she'd stepped down from her own nonprofit after a brutal legal fight with her ex-husband, the kind of fight that buries a woman's name even when she wins. The message read, "They erased me from the company I built, but your words reminded me that being unseen doesn't mean being powerless. If you ever build something new, I'd like to help." I looked up at the table. They were still talking about my tone, still dissecting how uncomfortable I made them feel. They didn't know my voice had already outgrown that room. I folded the napkin beside my plate, stood up slowly. I won't fight to stay somewhere I was never invited to in the first place, I said, steady. Mom opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. I turned and walked toward the door. No plates dropped, no chairs scraped in protest. As I reached the foyer, a soft voice followed me. "Aunt V?" It was my niece, Rachel, barely 12, big eyes, even bigger questions. "Are you okay?" I turned just enough to meet her gaze. "I'm finally becoming someone I can't lose," I told her. Then I opened the door, stepped into the night, and let it close behind me. On the drive home, the streetlights blurred across the windshield. The road was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't suffocate, but clears. And then my phone pinged again. May. "I think we should build something together." "That's nice. But I've already built my own table." The words hadn't left my mouth. They didn't need to. I said them into the quiet of my kitchen, into the space where I used to wonder how to get back in. Now I just wondered why I ever waited for a door to open that was bolted from the inside. 3 days had passed since the dinner, since Rachel's small voice asked if I was okay, since my mother's face tensed when I refused to fold neatly into their choreography. The house had stayed quiet. Too quiet. Until the call came. Rowena Voss. I hadn't heard her voice in years. She was one of the fund's earliest external board members, old school, dry as parchment, the type of woman who could sniff out vanity under a silk scarf. She never spoke unless she was prepared to burn something down with just a sentence. And that's exactly what she did. "I've seen enough," she said without greeting. "I'm initiating a review of all founding documentation." I paused, not because I was surprised, but because something in my chest finally uncoiled. She didn't wait for me to speak, just hung up. Power doesn't always speak first, but when it moves, the room shifts. That same afternoon, I received 2 emails forwarded to me anonymously. The first was from a junior associate, someone I trained when I was still foolish enough to believe effort guaranteed respect. "We're concerned about inconsistencies in the fund's founding narrative." The second email hit harder. It contained scans of my original logo sketches, my timelines, even a personal email I'd sent to Delphine outlining our first-year strategy. I'd found those designs once on a boardroom slide, credited to a consulting firm that had never existed. They thought silence would erase the roots. They forgot roots grow underground. I didn't reply to the memos. I didn't leak them. I just saved them in a folder labeled Undeniable. The next morning, I heard about the emergency board meeting from a friend on the periphery, someone who'd seen the Zoom invite list float through Slack like a secret someone forgot to secure. Review of founding roles. Clarification meeting closed. I wasn't invited. Of course not. But every room they lock becomes one I outgrow. Midday, another message arrived, this time from Arliss. Attached. The role clarification memo, draft V2. I opened it slowly, no rush in my body, no shaking in my hands. It was just text, just bullet points. And there it was. Initial contributor and founding operations lead, Venora Ellis. It wasn't bolded. It wasn't at the top. But it was there. For the first time in years, it was there. I ran my finger across the screen, as if the paper could feel me tracing back what they tried to bury. It's not a trophy, it's a record. Later that day, I stepped outside and stood beneath the old oak tree in my yard, the one my father planted before I was born. Its roots had cracked the concrete sidewalk over time, not quickly, not loudly, but with certainty. They kept thinking I was trying to come back, but I never was. I was trying to move forward, without dragging them with me. That evening, another email arrived, this time with a header soaked in politeness. We'd like to formally welcome you to next month's Leadership Summit. Seat 2B is reserved. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed once. Soft, full, final. That's nice, I said aloud, but I've already built my own table, and now it begins. May's message echoed in my mind as I sat on the porch steps the next morning, coffee cooling fast in my hands. A week had passed since the leadership memo had gone public, since my name was printed, for the first time, as a founding operations lead. Not an asterisk, not a whispered nod. A line, in writing. I hadn't spoken. I didn't need to. The Legacy Fund released a statement 2 days later, carefully phrased, legally brushed clean. Something about internal review and clarification of organizational roles. No names, no direct apologies. But anyone paying attention knew. A reporter from the Courier called, asking if I'd be willing to comment. I said no. Let them perform their cleanup. I'm not stepping into their spin cycle. I wasn't looking to be their counterpoint in a press war. They were crumbling on their own. By Wednesday, a small watchdog site, one that didn't depend on donor ads, published a story titled, Silent Builders, How Legacy Fund's Origins Were Reshaped. It was everything I had feared and everything I had hoped. Quotes from internal staff, screenshots of early drafts I recognized immediately, a scanned logo sketch with my handwriting visible. They printed it without fanfare, but the facts stood taller than any headline. My name wasn't the center of the story, but it was the weight behind it. Public reaction was mixed. Some loyalists called it a smear. Others commented things like, finally, we knew something was off. This explains why Gavin never answered our emails. Inside the walls, though, it was different. I could tell. Gavin called me that evening, first time in almost 4 years. His voice was measured, like a man talking to a ticking clock. Let's find a way to contain this, he said. Quietly. I think we can agree the optics aren't good for anyone. I let the silence sit between us like a third voice. Then I said, you should have thought about that before you rewrote the credits. He hung up without another word. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. It wasn't just the lies. It was the comfort they had while telling them. I remembered something an old professor once said when someone asked about power. Power isn't loud, it's who decides what gets remembered. And now, the remembering was out of their hands. Later that week, an email came through from the organizers of a women's entrepreneurship conference in Atlanta. Subject line, Foundations That Don't Break, Invitation to Speak. I stared at the screen. I didn't go looking for a platform. I became one. That night, I reopened my notebook. The one where I used to track meeting notes and grocery lists. The back pages had always been reserved for thoughts I didn't know what to do with. Now they read like blueprints. And then, as if the universe was winking, another message landed in my inbox. A name I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. If you ever need someone. I clicked. I was there. I saw what they did. I never said anything because I thought I'd lose everything. But I'm ready now. If you ever need someone to speak, I will. I read it twice, closed my eyes, and whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the air that had always been too still. And now it begins. The next morning, I opened the audit summary in my inbox and stared at the PDF before clicking. I didn't need to rush. It wasn't like I hadn't already lived every line of it. But there was something about seeing it there, formalized and official, that made me take a breath. Page 4. Initial contributor and founding operations lead, Venora Ellis. Not bold, not underlined. But there. It took a paper trail to be seen. But I was never invisible, just inconvenient. Within 48 hours, 3 board members submitted their resignations. No public spectacle, no press conferences, just quiet exits from people who realized they'd stood still for too long beside something crooked. Delphine released a carefully worded statement, stepping back to focus on family, as if the timing were just coincidence. Gavin, predictably, issued a formal apology. But it wasn't to me, it was to the fund. They apologized to preserve image, I thought, not to restore integrity. Later that week, I received an offer, a seat on the restructured board, a warm welcome, a second chance, an olive branch wrapped in PR strategy. I declined with one line. I no longer need a title to validate the work I've already done. I remembered something my old mentor once told me. Don't build to be recognized. Build so it stands without your name on it. And I had. Quietly, steadily. When I visited a local college the following Thursday to speak at their seminar on whistleblowing and gendered erasure, I wasn't prepared for how many young faces were in the room. Students, staff, women with notebooks and questions that sounded a little too familiar. One of them stood up and asked, "How did you stay quiet for so long without giving up?" I smiled, not because it was easy to answer, but because I finally could. Silence isn't weakness, I told them. Sometimes it's a weapon waiting to aim correctly. There was no applause, just a long, quiet nodding in the room. That was enough. The next morning, I sat in my favorite corner of a small bookstore downtown. Laptop open, coffee lukewarm. I added the last paragraph to a document I'd been writing on and off for years, a personal account of everything I never got to say aloud. I typed the final sentence. Not vindictive, just complete. Then I clicked Save and closed the lid. I didn't need an audience. I just needed the ending. That afternoon, a package arrived at my front door. No return label, brown craft paper, a single strip of tape. Inside, a handwritten note on thick cardstock and a thumb drive taped to the back. I saw everything. I kept copies, just in case you ever needed them. No signature. But I knew exactly who it came from, Delphine's former assistant. The one who always offered me a glass of water and a tired smile in meetings. I leaned back in my chair, holding the card gently between my fingers. Some stories finish after the ending. Some truths arrive after the reckoning. I placed the envelope down beside the notebook, its weight still humming beneath my fingertips. For a long time, I just sat there in the silence, the kind that didn't feel lonely, just steady. After everything, it wasn't anger that lingered. It was clarity. I knew exactly what needed to come next. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a dusty storefront tucked between a bakery and a laundromat on Cannon Street. I held the keys like they were more than metal, like they were witness. I turned the lock, stepped inside, and inhaled the scent of paint and fresh possibility. The floors were warm oak, the walls a muted terracotta. Bookshelves hugged the corners, lined with cookbooks, community bulletins, half-finished journals waiting to be filled. In the center, a long wooden table, refinished by a retired neighbor who used to be a carpenter. No velvet ropes, no assigned seating. A hand-painted sign hung in the front window. The Table Project. I never needed to be seated at their table. I just needed to build one they could never take away. Our first gathering was small, 6 women, 2 teens, and 1 retired nurse who used to run a quilting circle. We didn't start with lectures. We passed around mugs of tea. Someone brought lemon bars. Conversation started slowly. Weather, traffic, rent. But by the time we circled back to why we're here, it was raw and wide open. A high school senior with braids tucked behind her ears asked, "What if they never say sorry?" I didn't have to pause. "Then you forgive for yourself," I said, "but remember for those who come after you." There was a kind of stillness after that, like air adjusting itself around truth. A week later, a journalist from the local paper came by. They ran a story titled, "Former Whistleblower Creates Space for Silenced Voices." It made the front page of the community section. They spelled my name right this time. I didn't correct the headline, I reclaimed it. Legacy isn't what they leave you, it's what you leave standing after they're done rewriting. The next day, I found an envelope in the mail with my mother's handwriting on the front. Inside was a single line on a folded card. I saw the article. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't read the rest. I placed the card in a drawer that also held expired coupons, a necklace from my first job, and a photo booth strip of me and Jessa from college. Some things didn't need closure, just a resting place. Forgiveness isn't always letting them back in. Sometimes it's just closing the door without slamming it. In the back room of the table project, I placed a single printed copy of my memoir on a shelf, the table I wasn't invited to. I wasn't submitting it anywhere. I wasn't looking for a review or an award. But I knew one day, someone would pull it down and read a chapter. Maybe that girl who asked about apologies. And maybe, just maybe, she'd feel a little less invisible. "If even one girl reads this and feels seen," I whispered, "then it was worth every silence." Before locking up for the night, I added one more chair at the main table. It wasn't for a guest, not even for me. It was for every story that hadn't been told yet. This time, no one gets left out. And with that, I turned off the lights.